Hello everyone and welcome to episode 3 of our Awarding Body Insights video interviews. Today we are joined by Candace Miller, MD of SFJ Awards Limited and Executive Director of the Workforce Development Trust, board member of FAB and also the lead member for the Professional Development and Equalities Working Group of FAB as well. So thank you so much for joining us today, Candace.
You're very welcome, and I apologise for giving you a mouthful at the very beginning to have to roll out there, but it's a pleasure to be here and thanks for inviting me, Kristina.
No problem at all. So today, obviously, we're covering small steps for a big impact on diversity, inclusion and equality in the awarding sector. So Candace, I guess my first question is why are you personally so passionate about EDI and how the awarding sector can be doing more in this area?
Okay, so that's actually a really interesting question. And I suppose first off, one of the things I'd want to say really is fling it right back and say, well, why isn't everybody passionate and concerned about equity, about diversity, about inclusion? We're all of us diverse, aren't we? Not just in terms of the protected characteristics, although those are clearly critical, but just also in terms of our backgrounds, our upbringing, our abilities, our socioeconomic standing, stages we're at in our lives, etc. All of us want to be treated with equity. We all want to feel belonging. We all want to feel respected and included at work and in our family, social and community lives. And so I guess I'm confident that none of us would want to be discriminated against on the basis of any personal characteristics. So, you know, why should we accept it happening to anyone else? Why shouldn't we be caring about making sure it doesn't? And since you asked why am I personally so passionate, well, I have to, I suppose, declare that in addition, multiple members of my family are autistic. They have Asperger's, as indeed do I, and all have had struggles at times because EDI concepts have maybe not been widely understood or addressed in education or work settings. So yes, it is also personal. I think your second bit of that question was, why do I believe the awarding sector can do more in this area? Well, collectively, awarding and assessment organisations really do have significant impact on education and training provision. And as the FAB co-chair Kirsty Donnelly said at our conference just last year, we are the engine room. We all take the principles of fairness or equity. It's all built into our DNA. We take that very seriously, as do the regulators. So we take a lot of care to ensure that our assessment and accreditation materials are inclusive, that they don't inadvertently discriminate. We want all learners to be equally able to demonstrate and be recognised for the knowledge, the skills, the behaviours they've developed, whether through formal education or other mechanisms, whatever their backgrounds, whatever their personal circumstances. So I suppose if we are the engine room, we awarding and assessment organisations do really have a clear responsibility to put our power behind driving up equity, diversity and inclusion for all. So it's important and it's personal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, especially with obviously you working with so many different learners as well on that side of things.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, we work across a wide range of sectors and internationally. So you know, it's kind of simple. Why wouldn't we be caring about it? Why shouldn't we? And why wouldn't we want to do something about it? Of course we do. Of course we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think are the most important things awarding organisations need to be thinking about, but also worrying about when it comes to EDI then?
Okay, a couple of thoughts about that then. Just in terms of the awarding organisations ourselves and our own requirements, as sort of an internal perspective, if you like. As you'll know very well, the awarding and assessment sector is specialised in its nature. It's relatively small in terms of overall workforce numbers, although it's quite difficult to be really precise because the occupational roles that we require don't often get counted discreetly within national statistics. But you know, we know we're small in the grand scheme of things. Small but powerful with a big impact. But the specialist nature of the work that we do also means that a lot of people do tend to move around within the sector. They go from AO to AO, or they go into maybe a college and then an AO and then back out again. So it's quite contained, if you like. And therefore, one challenge that we really have as a sector and as individual businesses is making sure that we can attract talent from across the whole population pool, and that we really are seen as a place where everyone belongs and people like me can, you know, truly succeed. So I think there's worries about that, and what we should be doing about that. You know, there's a lot really. Individually, awarding organisations, I know, are reviewing their own status. They're looking at the diversity of their workforce, looking at the progression opportunities they provide internally, how well they ensure they've got a welcoming and inclusive environment, the quality that they build into the way in which they run their activities, and how all of those matters impact on how they can attract, they can recruit, and they can retain the talent they need. So they're all doing that individually now anyway, and it's really, I think, important for the future success, if you like, of the sector, and also the ability to put that power and that drive behind the changes that we think we need to see happening across education and training. A key part of that, and a key concern for us then at FAB, is to support our members in those individual EDI development journeys. And part of that is about making it play into the wider potential workforce pool, who may never even have considered that there are careers within assessment and awarding organisations, that there are in fact excellent careers to be had, and really rewarding and exciting and challenging jobs that you can take you into all sorts of places. I mean, just as an aside, and I'm sorry if I'm going to babble on, I have a tendency to do that, but you know, in my career I have been inside and at the, you know, looking down on power stations in the top of the turbine house. I've been out on trawlers in the North Sea. I've just experienced so much, from arts to zoology, in everything really, as part and parcel of a career spent in assessment and education. So, but a lot of people don't even have a clue that we've got that diversity of activity, and there's so much to learn. It's constantly evolving and changing. It's just very exciting. So I think part of what we need to do really is how do we as FAB support our members to sort of make that much more accessible and aware to everybody. And you mentioned the working group that I chair, and what we've been doing there is really trying to develop clear career pathways for the different areas of activity within awarding and assessment, with competency specifications, with relevant learning support mechanisms, with the aim being to help demystify the roles that are in the sector and increase the visibility of those careers. And in turn, that will support increasing diversity in our workforce, and as a consequence of that, our ability to present and support and drive forward higher levels of equality, diversity and inclusion within the whole population of learning and development that we help to support.
No, absolutely. And I think, you know, from our side, you tend to find that a lot of people, you ask them how they got onto awarding body roles, they normally started as an admin, sort of, and fell into it and worked their way up, kind of thing.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I did. So I started, my first degree is in ethology, which is the study of animal behaviour. I did a zoology degree, did a stint as an education officer in a zoo. Was looking around thinking, well, this education business is quite interesting, what else could I do? I got a job as basically administration job within an awarding organisation, and the rest, as they say, is history. It just went on from there, moved from job to job, changed from body to body, and I've had a wonderful career. I still am having a wonderful career. So come on, folks, come and join us. Yeah.
I love that, the advocate for it, working your way up.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So obviously recruitment, as you mentioned, is one stage of improving you know, equality and diversity. However, I think kind of a lot of people that maybe come from diverse backgrounds and sort of see, you know, come into organisations where people, well, maybe they feel that they're kind of like the odd one out, or you know, sort of the first person in there. How do you think kind of inclusion should be looked at? Like, how do you see it should be defined? How could what could organisations be doing to kind of implement more inclusive environments and really make a difference in this area?
Okay, I mean, that's a really, really good question. And, you know, I'm not a lexicographer, but, you know, you asked about what's the definition, would you define inclusion? And I don't know who came up with it, but one of the very best descriptions that I ever heard about inclusion is this, that you can tick an equality box by sending everybody exactly the same invitations to a dance. But if you don't and then invite some people to dance, or you don't let them in on the secret of any new dance moves or any dances that they've never come across before, you're not including them. They won't feel like they belong. They're going to feel excluded. I think we can probably all recognize what that would feel like. So as an analogy, that works for me. And as I say, I'm sorry if I'm not crediting somebody, because I've just heard it and I thought, yeah, that sticks. That's really good. I think being inclusive, in my book, it's a choice. It's about taking active steps to ensure that everyone isn't just invited, but is also encouraged to get involved and supported to learn those dance moves if they don't already know them, or just to, you know, come on, let's go dance together. And it's also not about staying silent, but actively challenging if we see behavior that is exclusive. So if we see huddles, you know, it's a bit like if you're the host at a party and you see a group of people and there's somebody standing and they're at the side wall, and this was me usually with my sort of own personal background. So I'm thinking, okay, I sort of want to talk, but I don't know how to break the ice and, you know, get involved. And lots of people have been there, you know, lots of us have done that. It's a typical situation. Well, if you are the first person from a different background coming into an organization, I wouldn't be at all surprised if you don't feel a bit like that. So if you are members of that organization and you think, okay, that's not on, that's not right, reach out, you know, be active about it, take charge of making sure everybody is able to join in and everybody feels that they really are valued and part of it. You know, I think leaders and managers have a big job to play in that within their own organization, but so also do all staff members. Now, we all come from a variety of backgrounds, and we all have a responsibility, I think, to make, if somebody has made it through the process of recruitment, selection, they've been appointed, they're going through an induction, they're proven they've got what it takes. So you've got to make sure they feel really part of things. So, you know, I'm in my own organization, I like to think that we're very inclusive, and we did some survey activity fairly recently about how do people feel about each other, and this notion of people being very friendly, being very welcoming, helping everybody to join in came through. So that was really positive. But I think there's also things that we can do as organizations to make sure that the way in which we present ourselves to individuals doesn't inadvertently create barriers that get in the way of people being able to feel that they're able to be part of it. So we need to think about the language that we use. We need to think about the imagery that we use if we want to truly represent the community of learners that we're seeking to engage with, or indeed the community of applicants we want to bring in as our talent pool to develop our services and our products. Think about how we present ourselves, you know, think about what do we do? How does our social life inside the organization play out? How do we, because we're not all spending, well, we are at the minute probably spending a lot of time in front of screens, aren't we? Because it's pandemic land still. But almost every organization will have a certain level of social interaction. Do you exclude people just because maybe, you know, they be a bit shyer, or or do you try and make them join in, help them feel welcome, help them feel wanted? We've talked, I think, in the past, you and I, about how do we present ourselves in, you know, in recruitment purposes, in adverts and so on. And, you know, there's a lot we could say, and probably, I don't know if we've got the time today, but just to talk about some of the imagery, some of the language that we use in our materials, our recruitment guides, how we present ourselves online, how we develop handbooks internally, all sorts of things that we could do that would make it easier for people to feel much stronger sense of belonging to the organization, because we are actively working to include them in rather than inadvertently, and it usually often is inadvertently excluding people just by the way we say and do what we do.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, not assuming that just because somebody's looking like they're joining in that they necessarily feel
absolutely
included as well. Absolutely. But being quite active about that.
Definitely. That's for me, that's that, you know, I think You know, diversity and equality, they should be facts. You know, you should be able to point at the data and say this is what it looks like. But inclusion is something you have to make an active choice about. You have to actively do it, and that happens in all facets of organisational life. So, you know, there's no one thing that you do. There's lots of things that you should do. I feel, to make sure that you're creating an inclusive environment.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, in terms of kind of things that you can do, what would be your top 5 small steps, as it were, but organisations could do now that don't necessarily require a lot of work and effort, but will actually have a big impact on what they want to achieve as part of their longer term strategies?
Okay. So I knew we were going to be talking this sort of question, so I have got some notes. I'm just going to remind myself of some of those. So one of them I've just sort of hinted at, really, which is about thinking about the language and the imagery that you use in your recruitment adverts. You know, there's a fair degree of evidence to show that there are some terms that are widely perceived to imply that applications would be favoured if they came from a male, while others that would imply that what the employer would really like is a female. Some terms will imply a certain age range. In fact, I heard that even being discussed on the radio this morning when I was getting up and getting the coffee on, about, you know, don't use the word energetic because it implies you're looking for somebody young, where actually there's probably lots of people in their 40s, 50s and so on who are equally capable of doing the job. Actually, I don't really agree with that, because I'm a bit older than that and I feel quite energetic. But the point is made. Think about the language you use. It doesn't need to take you very long. And in fact, there are online language checkers that you can even use. So it can be quite quickly. Next time you've got a job advert, think about the language you use. Does it limit inadvertently the talent pool you're appealing to? Or could you, by using more neutral language, make it play out more? Similarly, the imagery you use, you know, does that imply that everybody looks like that in grey suits or whatever? Or does it imply that you're open to all sorts of people bringing their whole selves to work, whatever that is? So that's one, I suppose. I think there's something about authenticity in this, and I would say that we see probably quite a lot of organizations making public statements, and I think, you know, that's good, but actually you have to demonstrate that you're doing something about it. You have to turn it into action and show that you're doing something actively. Otherwise, I guess you risk being seen as perhaps being a bit cynical, jumping on the bandwagon, and that will have the opposite effect to the one you're trying to achieve. So, you know, FAB has publicly stated its commitment to improving equality, diversity and inclusion in vocational education, and our members are working to deliver that, and we will be talking more and more about that. We will be showing what we're doing in order to take that forward. And so I suppose, you know, a small step for me is say what you mean, and then mean it and do it, would be one thing you could do. Listen to the voices of the staff you have already, get their perspectives on what steps to take, both in terms of your internal processes and development, and in how you develop and present your organization, to make sure you're recruiting well, you're making people feel very much that they belong, and that you value the skills and the talents that they're bringing. And think about what might they suggest? You know, there's, and again, I've got sort of a few examples of things, just as for instance, do you run pulse checks? Do you run surveys? You know, I mentioned that we do that. Do you do that? And if you do it, what do you do about it at the end of the day? You know, don't just do something positive at the end of it that takes the voices of your staff, takes the voices of your clients, your customers and others, and actually turn those into action. It's not hard to do, but if you're wanting to take things forward, I would say it's an important, relatively small step to do. And you can, I think, then use that perhaps to build a roadmap to how to get to, you know, if that's where I want to get to, listen to people, get their advice, move forward in various steps along that journey, and we'd have check-in points. So have a roadmap. You know, we do a lot of project work in the awarding and assessment sector, and we have processes by which we set timelines. We have processes by which we say we're going to look for this evidence. If we haven't got that evidence, we're going to do that instead. well, actually, we could apply that. Just build a roadmap, project map it out, work it through. If you think you have a big change to undertake, it will probably take you a few years to do that. So don't set your project plan up, so we're going to do this and we'll have finished it by next summer, because you probably won't. So it's a longer term process, but you can have a roadmap. Use your own skills. Do what you do elsewhere in the business. And then just some very simple little things. If you have a staff newsletter, or you offer a range of staff benefits, and who doesn't, do you recognise and celebrate the various festivals and holidays that your workforce and your customer base enjoy? We do that a lot in our educational institutions, but there's probably much more scope to do even more about that within our own organisations as well. And that doesn't only help your existing staff to feel like they belong, but it might also help you to attract new staff who can see that you have a culture that recognises that there is a genuinely a wide range of interests and experiences and allegiances that your whole workforce take as important to them, and that you recognise that and you'll support that. I don't know if that's 5, but that's the things that sort of come to head, Kristina.
No, I think that is actually 5 as well. So
is it? Oh, well, there you go. There you go.
But no, I agree. I think there's some really useful things there. I think sort of your first point around the language, there's a piece of research, and I can't remember who did it now, but apparently females are less likely to apply for male dominated worded adverts.
Yes.
But actually males are equally going to apply for either female or male dominated worded adverts. So apparently the language doesn't put males off as much as females for some reason.
I don't know that. I don't know. I just know that there is research, and that it's quite well evidenced, and therefore it's worth taking account of.
Yeah.
So,
no, absolutely.
Be careful how you. But it was interesting, as I say. I heard it being mentioned on the radio this morning, but it was in relation to age, in relation to does the way that you're presenting a job advert make people think, oh, they want somebody young, where actually you might be mid-career, and a lot of people are having, are they not, to have career changes and retrain and redevelop and move in different directions. So if you're inadvertently blocking those people from coming forward, and they might be exactly the individuals that your organization will benefit from, so why would you do that?
No, especially as we said at the beginning, it's such a specialist area as well.
Absolutely. We want the best of the talents, and we're in competition with so many others. We want the best, so whatever you do, don't limit your pool too much. Don't limit it.
Yeah, I mean, full agreement with that one, I have to say.
Thought you might.
And I guess finally then, Candace, what words of warning or caution do you have for organisations?
Okay, so there's a couple I think we've already mentioned. So one of them is about it's about assumptions. Don't make assumptions. Look at and look for evidence, and use evidence to make informed decisions. Don't just assume that everything's okay because nobody's complained, for instance. Ask, find out, is everything okay? What would make things even better? Don't be afraid to talk, listen, to share, to learn. None of us know everything. I think there's a certain amount of evidence that suggests that a lot of people might be afraid to ask questions and maybe say the wrong thing, thinking, am I going to be judged if I do that? But it is through communication that we get to better understanding, engagement, and an awareness of all the different strengths that come through from having a much more diverse and included workforce. So, the cautions for me in that are, don't make assumptions, and don't be afraid to talk. It's a bit like everything else we've said. You need to be able to have conversations in which people feel safe, that they can talk openly, and that's something about your overall culture, I think, that as an organization you need to think about. But don't just assume everything's okay. You said it yourself. Don't assume because if people look like they're joining in that they really are joining in. Talk to them, find out. And then the other thing I'd say as a word of caution is, because I heard this come up actually from somebody else, is don't fall into the trap of thinking that including something more automatically means you're excluding something else. you know, inclusion is additive. It's not, you're not excluding. So, and in fact, this came up in a conversation that you and I had. I think there was a remark that somebody was making about Christmas, and about whether it was okay to say Happy Christmas, or whether you really should be saying have a lovely festive season or something of that sort. And, you know, just because this particular festival at this particular time of the year happens to be called Christmas, that doesn't have to mean that you can't also say Happy Diwali when that comes, or whatever. You know, it doesn't mean that you're excluding by including. You can, it's additive, it's building on, it's adding to things. So I think what I'd sum that up as a word of caution for organizations is, don't rest on your laurels. Don't think it's all hunky-dory. You need to be talking, you need to be thinking about what matters to you, to your staff, to the people that you support through the qualifications that you offer, and be open to having conversations about it and to celebrating the real benefits that diversity can bring. That's it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. What great words to end on there, Candace, as well. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak today. You know, spending your time with me as well, going sort of pre and during today as well. It's been really helpful, and hopefully as well, all the work that you guys at Fab are doing, you know, is going to have some real impacts and some real changes as well. Sort of, if not right now, then, you know, sort of over the next sort of months and years, etc. in the long term.
Absolutely. We have a big job to do, but we're all on for it. You know, we're all being energetic about getting there as well. So we will have a big impact, I'm certain of it, and we should do, and we will do. So yeah, thank you very much, Kristina. I enjoyed chatting with you.
You too. Well, thank you so much again.
You're welcome.
And thank you everyone for watching, and we look forward to seeing you all again on our next episode. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.